Dinner tables are supposed to be about family, laughter, maybe even a little gossip about the neighbors. Mine? It turned into a battlefield. No raised voices, no smashed plates, just a simple stack of papers sliding across the table. Loan papers. $40,000 worth. And suddenly, I wasn't a son anymore. I was a signature, a lifeline, a walking bank account they thought they could cash. Here's the irony. They expected me to fold, to take the pen, smile politely, and say, "Of course, Mom and Dad, I'll carry your burden." But behind my silence, there wasn't compliance. There was a storm. Because what they didn't know, what made the whole scene almost comical, was that I had already prepared my escape. My secret wasn't printed on paper. It was tucked away in my pocket, paid for, and waiting. But before I tell you how a dinner. Invitation turned into an ambush. You should know who I am, because this wasn't just about loan papers. It was about years of being underestimated, of family ties stretched thin by money and control. My name? Let's just call me Daniel. I wasn't born with wealth, but I was born with a stubborn streak that refused to die. And if you really want to understand the weight of that moment, you need to rewind with me. Back before the dinner, before the papers, before the quiet rebellion that had been building inside me for years. See, stories like mine don't start with triumph. They start with small humiliations, with invisible chains that tighten until you either break or break free. That dinner was supposed to be about food. Instead, it became the stage for my family's expectations versus my quiet, growing defiance. And if you think this is just another story about money, think again. Because 40K wasn't just a number, it was a symbol, a price tag they thought. They could hang around my neck. But what they didn't realize? Every chain has a weak link, and I had already found mine. So buckle up. Because this isn't a story about loans or signatures, it's a story about what happens when someone finally decides enough is enough. And trust me, by the end, you'll understand why walking away wasn't just my choice, it was my freedom. Welcome, story lovers. From where are you watching? Drop your city name in the comments so we can see how far this story travels. Daniel wasn't always the man sitting at that dinner table, holding back a storm behind his silence. Long before the papers, before the quiet rebellion, he was just a kid trying to make sense of life in a house where money was louder than love. His family wasn't poor in the strictest sense. They had a roof, they had food most nights, but the house was heavy with unspoken rules. Rules like, your worth is measured in how much you can provide, and family loyalty means sacrifice, even if it breaks you. For Daniel, that message started young. As a boy, he was bright, the kind of kid who took apart radios just to see how they worked. Teachers loved him. That one's going places, they would say with a smile. And Daniel believed them, at least until reality started to sink in. Because in his house, ambition wasn't nurtured, it was redirected. Every dream he voiced, college, career, travel, was met with the same reminder. Don't forget where you come from. Don't get too big for your own family. At first, he brushed it off. Kids dream, parents worry, that's normal, right? But as he got older, the reminders became demands. His savings account, raided when his dad's car broke down, his part-time job earnings, handed over when his mom fell behind on bills. Every step forward he took for himself seemed to become another tether pulling him back. Still, Daniel didn't stop dreaming. In high school, he wanted to study engineering. He had the grades, the recommendations, the drive. He could see it so clearly, building bridges, designing something that would last longer than he ever could. But dreams, as Daniel learned, fold fast under the weight of responsibility. The first collapse came when his father got sick. Nothing dramatic at first, just fatigue, endless doctor's appointments, then medical bills that stacked higher than the kitchen counter. Insurance didn't cover it all. His parents sat him down one night and said the words that changed his path. "We need your help." It wasn't a request. It was a decree. Daniel dropped his college applications into the trash. Instead, he picked up extra shifts at the hardware store. Morning classes turned into late-night stocking shelves, and the glow of textbooks was replaced with the harsh flicker of fluorescent lights. Each paycheck didn't go toward tuition or dreams. It went into the family's bottomless pit of needs. Betrayal came later, when his younger brother, the golden child, was sent to college without question. Loans were taken, favors were called in, sacrifices were made, but not for Daniel. He was the one who had to step up. His brother was the one who got to step out. That was the moment something cracked. He never said it out loud, never. Accused his parents of favoritism. But deep inside, resentment took root. Not because he hated his brother, but because he finally saw the truth. His dreams were negotiable, his future disposable, as long as the family's needs came first. Yet, even in resentment, Daniel didn't collapse. He survived in small, almost invisible ways. He read old textbooks borrowed from the library, just to keep his mind alive. He sketched designs on napkins during lunch breaks, bridges and buildings that would never be built. He learned to stretch. $20 across a week, eating ramen while his parents dined out with relatives, and through it all he kept quiet. No complaints, no outbursts. Just quiet sacrifices layered one on top of another until the weight became unbearable. The breaking point? It came not in a dramatic fight, but in silence. His mother once thanked him, not for his sacrifices, but for knowing his place. She said it with a smile, maybe even thinking it was a compliment. But those words carved into him like glass. Knowing his place. Daniel realized then, his place in their eyes wasn't beside his dreams. It was beneath theirs. From that day, something shifted. He still showed up, still handed over paychecks, still played the role of dutiful son. But inside, he was storing away something far more valuable than money. Resolve. Resolve that one day. He wouldn't just survive under their rules, he would step out from them. It would take years. Years of swallowing pride, of enduring humiliation, of watching others get what he'd been denied. But Daniel never let the ember inside him die. And that's why the dinner ambush wasn't just about loan papers. It was the echo of every time. He'd been forced to give up something he wanted. Every sacrifice, every dismissal, every invisible act of survival led to that table. They thought they were still in control, but they didn't know the truth. The boy who once knew his place had quietly built a secret life beyond their reach. For years, Daniel lived like a shadow of himself. Wake, work, give, repeat. His life was an endless cycle of other people's needs, but sometimes change doesn't come like a thunderclap. It creeps in like a whisper, then grows louder until you can't ignore it. Daniel's whisper came in the form of an unexpected opportunity. One day, while stacking boxes at the hardware store, a customer noticed his detailed notes. Daniel had scribbled out measurements, load-bearing calculations, even a sketch of how the shelves could be reorganized for efficiency. The customer, a local contractor named Mr. Harris, was impressed. "You ever think about engineering?" he asked casually. Daniel almost laughed. "Think about it? It's all I ever thought about." But out loud, he just shrugged. Harris studied him a moment longer. "You've got a good eye. Not everyone notices details like that. If you ever want real work, give me a call." That card slipped into his pocket, burned like fire. For the first time in years, someone saw him, not just what he could provide. It was the spark he needed, but sparks are dangerous in houses soaked with gasoline. When Daniel told his parents about Harris's offer, their reaction wasn't pride. It was suspicion. "Contracting? That's unstable," his father scoffed. "Besides, we need you here. You can't just go chasing dreams while we're drowning," his mother added. There it was again. His worth measured not by potential, but by how tightly he stayed tethered. Still, Daniel couldn't ignore the card. He started working part-time with Harris, learning the ropes of construction design and site planning. It was exhausting, hardware store shifts in the morning, construction sites in the evening, but it fed a hunger he'd buried long ago. That hunger, though, bred resentment at home. His brother, now in college, mocked his side hustle. His parents accused him of being selfish for coming home late. Every paycheck from Harris felt like a victory, but every confrontation at home reminded him the battle was far from over. The real test came when Harris offered him something bigger, a full-time apprenticeship with the promise of college credits, through a partnership program. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a doorway, a chance to finally build a life that was his own. And with that doorway came a dilemma. Taking the apprenticeship meant cutting back the money he handed over at home. It meant saying no to the bottomless pit of family demands. It meant risk. If he failed, there'd be no safety net. He stayed awake nights, weighing loyalty against freedom, obligation against survival. The decision was made for him one evening, though not in the way he expected. He came home to find his mother waiting with unopened bills. "You'll sign for a small loan, won't you?" she said. "Just a few thousand to keep us afloat. You can pay it off with this new job." The words stung. This wasn't about support. It was about control. Every step forward, they found a way to chain him back, and Daniel, for the first time, said no. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. Just a quiet, steady refusal. His mother's face hardened. His father muttered about ingratitude, but Daniel held firm. That no was his rebellion, small but seismic. From that moment, the tension in the house became unbearable. Every dinner was a minefield, every conversation a trap. His parents grew sharper, more critical, while his brother flaunted his college successes like weapons. Still, Daniel pushed forward. Harris noticed his talent for design and entrusted him with small projects, sketching layouts, calculating materials. Daniel poured himself into the work, staying up late, driven not just by ambition, but by desperation. But success has a way of drawing out jealousy. On the job site, another apprentice named Kyle grew hostile. Kyle had seniority, but Daniel's design started catching more attention. What Daniel saw as teamwork, Kyle saw as threat. The snide comments, the subtle sabotage, the whispered rumors, it all built tension. Harris wasn't blind to it, but he believed in letting competition sharpen talent. For Daniel, it was another battlefield. Family on one side, rival on the other, with his dreams caught in the middle. The stakes rose even higher when Harris recommended Daniel for a scholarship tied to the apprenticeship program. It wasn't guaranteed, but it could cover tuition, opening the door to a formal engineering degree, a future, a life. To apply, though, Daniel needed references, and he made the mistake of mentioning it at home. His father laughed outright. "Scholarship? You? Don't waste your time. You're not the college type." The words sliced deep, but Daniel swallowed them. He'd heard them before, just in different forms. He gathered references from Harris and others, pushing forward quietly. But his secret applications, late-night forms, and hidden emails only deepened the rift at home. And then came the injustice that nearly broke him. Weeks later, he discovered that someone close, had tampered with his application email. The scholarship committee never received his documents. When he checked the logs, he realized the application had been deleted from his account. He didn't want to believe it, but the evidence pointed home. It wasn't a stranger, wasn't Kyle, wasn't fate. It was sabotage. By family. His own brother admitted it in a moment of careless pride. "You're not cut out for this. Mom and Dad need you here anyway." That was the moment Daniel stopped seeing himself as bound. He saw himself as caged, and cages are meant to be broken. The injustice didn't kill his dream. It fueled it. Harris, sensing something deeper, gave Daniel quiet advice. If you want to rise, you've got to stop asking for permission. Daniel took those words to heart. He began saving in secret, tucking away every extra dollar. He didn't spend on clothes, didn't splurge on nights out. Every cent went into an account his parents didn't know existed. For the first time, he wasn't just surviving, he was plotting. The rebellion was no longer silent. It was alive, pulsing, pushing him toward something bigger. The dinner ambush with loan papers was coming. The $40K wasn't just money, it was the ultimate attempt to chain him forever. But what his parents didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Daniel had already chosen his side. He was no longer the boy who knew his place. He was a man with a secret plan, and that secret was about to change everything. The night of the dinner was set up like a performance, though Daniel didn't know it walking in. His mother had been unusually cheerful, his father oddly quiet, his brother already seated at the head of the table as if presiding over something official. The smell of roasted chicken filled the room, but beneath it was the tension of expectation. Daniel sat, sensing the shift but keeping his expression neutral. He'd lived long enough under this roof to recognize when kindness had strings attached. The meal started normally. Small talk about the weather, about his brother's latest grades, about the rising cost of groceries. But as the plates cleared, the tone shifted. His father's face hardened, his mother exchanged a glance with his brother, and then, with a rehearsed casualness, she slid a folder across the table. "Daniel," she began sweetly, "we need you to sign these." He looked down. The papers were thick, bound neatly with a clip. His name was already typed at the bottom. The words at the top hit like a hammer. Loan agreement. $40,000. The room went still, as if holding its breath. Daniel's pulse quickened, but he didn't reach for the papers. He just stared. "Don't look so shocked," his brother said, smirking. "You've always been the responsible one. This is just what family does." Family. The word felt like poison. His father leaned forward, voice firm. "It's a simple matter, son. We need the funds, and with your job, your record, you're the best candidate. You'll sign. It's not a request." There it was again, that decree he'd lived under for so long. But this time, Daniel didn't flinch. He picked up the papers slowly, scanning the lines, the cold legal language that would bind him for years. Every number on the page was a shackle. Every clause was another chain. His silence stretched long enough to make them shift in their seats. Finally, he set the papers back down, pushed them gently toward the center of the table, and spoke, calm, steady, unshaken. No. It was a small word, but it detonated like a bomb. His mother's smile cracked, his father's face reddened, his brother let out a scoff of disbelief. "No," his father barked. "Do you have any idea what's at stake? Do you think you're too good to help your own family?" Daniel met his gaze evenly. "I've helped my whole life, every paycheck, every sacrifice, my dreams, my future, and every time. It was never enough. You don't want my help. You want my chains." The air thickened. His mother shook her head, wounded. "How can you say that? After everything we've given you?" "Given me." Daniel laughed bitterly, a sharp edge in his tone. "You gave my brother opportunity. You gave me obligation. You gave him college. You gave me bills. You gave him freedom. And me, a cage." His brother slammed his fork down. "Stop playing the victim. You're just scared to step up." "Scared?" Daniel's voice rose now, sharp, cutting. "I've faced every humiliation, every dismissal, every debt you threw my way, and I stayed quiet. But not anymore." The table fell silent, the words hanging heavy. His father sneered. "You think you can just walk away? You're nothing without us." That was when Daniel smiled. Not mockingly, not cruelly, just calmly. He reached into his pocket and placed something on the table, a small, folded piece of paper. Not loan documents, not a paycheck. A receipt? A one-way ticket? They stared at it, confused. "This," Daniel said softly, "is my secret. While you've been planning how to bind me with debt, I've been planning my freedom, my apprenticeship, my savings, my future. It's already in motion. I don't need to sign your loan. I don't need to carry your weight anymore." His mother gasped. His brother's smirk vanished. His father's hand trembled against the table. Daniel stood, his chair scraping back against the floor, the sound slicing through the silence like a blade. For years, I believed family meant sacrifice, but tonight I realized something else. Sometimes family isn't about blood. It's about who actually wants you to succeed. And you've only wanted me to stay small enough to serve you. No one spoke. The roasted chicken lay untouched, the papers untouched, the air heavy with shock. Daniel tucked the ticket back into his pocket, straightened his shoulders, and walked toward the door. "This dinner," he said without turning back, "was supposed to be my ambush. Instead, it became my liberation." The sound of the door closing behind him was louder than any argument. It was the sound of a chain snapping, of a man no longer bound. At that moment, Daniel wasn't just rejecting a loan, he was rejecting a lifetime of control. And the silence. Left at that table was the silence of power shifting forever. Dear audience, if you're feeling the weight of Daniel's moment, give this story a like. It really helps push these powerful stories out to more people. Ruth didn't linger. In that boardroom after dropping her bombshell, she walked out quietly, her mop bucket still waiting in the hallway, as if to remind her of where she came from and how far she had just leapt. The next morning, headlines blazed across local news. Whistleblower exposes corporate fraud. Cameras showed a blurred image of a woman in janitor's scrubs leaving the building, but her name remained hidden at her request. For once, Ruth wasn't chasing recognition. She was chasing something bigger: freedom. Within weeks, federal investigators stormed the company. Executives who once mocked her were now stumbling in front of microphones, fumbling excuses. Their empire crumbled. The people who thought they were untouchable had been brought down by the very woman they had ignored. And Ruth, she finally received something she hadn't felt in years: choice. The government rewarded her with a whistleblower settlement. The company offered her a cushy executive position to buy her silence. Even rival firms dangled jobs with six-figure salaries. But Ruth had already decided. She wasn't going back into anyone's shadow. Instead, she opened a modest consulting firm from her living room. No fancy office, no glossy glass windows. Just Ruth, a laptop, and years of knowledge she had never been allowed to use. She named it Clear Path Consulting because for the first time, her path was finally clear. Her first clients were small nonprofits struggling with audits. Then came mid-sized businesses. Before long, word spread. The woman who had exposed millions in fraud was now helping companies stay honest. But Ruth wasn't chasing corporations. She was chasing change. Every Friday, she hosted free workshops for low-income women, teaching them financial literacy, bookkeeping, and auditing basics. She remembered all those nights she had studied spreadsheets on her cracked phone screen, just to keep her mind sharp. Now she wanted other women to know they had that power too. One of her students was a single mother who worked as a cashier. Another, a young woman who dropped out of college because she couldn't afford tuition. They came in timid, unsure, afraid of numbers. But under Ruth's patient guidance, they left confident, armed with skills that could open doors. Her son, Daniel, became her biggest cheerleader. He no longer saw his mother through the lens of exhaustion and sacrifice. Instead, he saw her as a warrior, someone who refused to stay invisible. By the time he graduated high school, he already wanted to study law, inspired by watching his mom stand up to giants. And Ruth? She began to smile again. She had enough money to live comfortably, but she didn't spend it on lavish cars or designer clothes. Instead, she bought a small home with a garden where she could finally rest. She planted roses because her mother once told her, "No matter how hard life gets, plant something that reminds you beauty still grows." Occasionally, she would get invited to conferences. Audiences expected a polished executive in a tailored suit, but Ruth always walked on stage in simple clothes, speaking with raw honesty about survival, resilience, and dignity. She reminded people that greatness doesn't always come from corner offices. It sometimes comes from janitors holding on to dreams in silence. And when she ended her speeches, she always said the same line: "I wasn't invisible. They just weren't looking closely enough." The once forgotten cleaner had become a mentor, a leader, and a symbol of hope. Her past was full of nights scrubbing floors, of whispered humiliation, of bills stacked higher than her courage. But her present was full of light, of voices she had inspired, of a son who proudly introduced her as "my mom," the woman who never gave up. The redemption wasn't just financial, it was human. Ruth didn't just change her own life. She changed how others believed in their own. And that's the thing about stories like Ruth's. They remind us that the people we overlook often carry the brightest flames. All it takes is one moment of courage, one choice to speak, one refusal to stay silent, to turn a forgotten life into a legacy. Thank you for watching, story lovers. Tell me, have you ever felt invisible in a room where you deserve to shine? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe because more powerful journeys like Ruth's are on the way. They once whispered about Ruth as if she was a shadow, just a janitor, just a single mom, just another face nobody would remember. But those whispers, they were wrong, because Ruth was never just anything. She was the woman who refused to let broken dreams bury her. She was the mother who turned survival into strategy, who carried a mop in one hand and her son's future in the other, and while the world ignored her, she was quietly sharpening her mind, biding her time, waiting for the moment to remind everyone what she was capable of. Her story isn't about revenge, it's about redemption. It's about courage born in the silence of unpaid bills, late nights, and endless sacrifices. What did Ruth teach us? That the world will often misjudge you by the role you play. Maid, driver, cashier, cleaner. But your title doesn't define you. Your choices do. Ruth didn't expose corruption just to bring others down. She did it to rise, not for herself, alone, but for every woman who had ever been underestimated, every worker who had ever been overlooked, every dreamer who had ever been told they were too small. Here's the twist most people don't know. 2 years after her whistleblower case, Ruth was honored at a global ethics conference. Executives, professors, and journalists flew in from around the world. But Ruth didn't talk about money or corruption or even her personal success. She talked about her son. How he once asked her, "Mom, are we invisible?" And how she promised him that one day the world would see. Now, her son is in college, studying law, determined to fight for justice the way his mother once did. That's her real legacy. Not the firm, not the headlines, not the millions. Her true success is that she raised a boy who will never let anyone feel invisible the way she once did. And so, dear listener, ask yourself, who around you might be living a hidden story? The cafeteria worker, the bus driver, the janitor, the neighbor quietly smiling but carrying 1,000 burdens. What if they are not what the world thinks? What if their breakthrough is only a heartbeat away? Never underestimate the quietest soul in the room, because sometimes the person holding the broom is also holding the blueprint for change. Ruth's story reminds us, power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's written on a napkin. Sometimes it's whispered in a late-night prayer. Sometimes it's carried by those the world refuses to see. So the next time you look past someone, stop. Look again. Because the invisible ones, they're often the ones rewriting the story. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories and new videos.